Say it all again.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, Wes, go ahead.
yeah, anyway, that of what we were covering there, we're going to start the project on January the 7th, and that will begin with Aurora. And
do you mean October 7th, Wes?
January 7th. We are slipping this back about 3 months.
Oh,
and that,
okay.
And that, quite frankly, is to give time for all parties on both sides to get things in order. For those customers that want to have SIP, their CPE be SIP enabled, they needed some more time to get that all lined up with their respective vendors and the manufacturers giving those quotes to the vendors, and for people to appropriately budget to get that ready. And the other thing is, quite frankly, CenturyLink has just been awarded 2 other ESInets across the country, and one is South Dakota, which I think we might have mentioned before, but that's starting October 1 and finishing in December. And then Southern California is starting also very, very quickly, too. So we want to make sure our resources are properly accounted for and getting the network ready and prioritizing as far as what Kevin and Nancy and I and the whole team wants to do for Colorado. We think that based upon our shared resources internally to the company, that January 7th is a better time to get started than it would be at the end of the year. So I trust that works for the Colorado community. We think that's better for both sides. And we're still working with a schedule, though, how that cascades to what we were working with before. For instance, Leda and Adams County moving, and some of that we'll see some slight movement, but not by very much from what we had already established before, even with Aurora going in the 7th.
So, Wes, with the agencies that are an absolute definite move, the ones that are scheduled for this year, have those agreements already been made with those PSAPs? Are they agreeing to the new schedule, or to the idea, at least, if you don't have the schedule lined out, that this is happening?
Haven't had time to socialize that. We actually just decided.
Okay, so that's what's happening right now. Gotcha.
Yeah. So for you, for instance, and for La Plata County and the others, Adams County, I had a chance to talk with Adams County this morning. And others, yeah, you bet. Nancy and I will be socializing all that to make sure that's okay with everybody. And again, I don't think we'll have too much movement. But there are those that we want to make sure that everybody's okay with. For instance, I know that Leda has a project coming up in March, so we want to safely get this done pretty close to where we were before. But again, I want to have that conversation, Nancy and I both, with each of you, where that movement is and what, if any, impact there is to you.
Wes, this is Daryl. It sounds like it's still in flux, but do you have any sense of whether this is going to extend the end of the 13 months? It was 13 months. Is it still going to be 13 months, meaning that it will go into January of 2021 now, or would you think you'll still be able to finish somewhere around the end of 2020?
Well, try as we might, we'd want to have the end date be pretty close to the same. But no, Daryl, I think realistically it will still slip out about a year. So I think we're going to tip just into 2021.
Okay.
Daryl, I saw you pulled up the grant award letter. Was there a concern there?
I just wanted to make sure the grant period extends till March 2022. So unless it slips a whole lot, we should still be safe. Okay, good. If we slip that much, I think we've got other issues. Yeah, that'd be quite a slip.
No, we're not concerned with that. Just for the record, we've got this thing pretty well lined out, but I think we want to be deliberate in everything that we do and making sure that everybody down the line is really set for their vac room, SIP, no SIP, and that sort of thing. And so I think that little extra breathing room is a good thing, quite frankly.
Does it not make your schedule pretty tight though in the beginning if you're not thinking you have to move too many people? because of moving the schedule to starting in January. Does that not overcrowd your schedule in the beginning of the year?
I'm looking at that now, and we had that, Bruce. We had that flux in there to begin with because things like the way that Kevin had laid the schedule out before, with the multiple PSAPs, each of the remotes having their own date. And I was looking at this early this morning. I think we still have enough flex in there where it doesn't crimp it too much to begin with. February gets a little crowded, but not in January. But those are the talks that Nancy and I want to have with all of you, where that might have some impact. But we're fine on that schedule. Although February will, to your point, be a little bit crowded. But I still have flex in March and some in April. As an example, for you, I think we're still in pretty good shape to put you in April. La Plata can still go later on. La Plata can slip back to even June or July. So I think you'll like that kind of news. So there's some good news in doing this, I think, for most everybody.
Okay. So are you planning to... I'm sorry, Kimberly, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to try and frame this in an action item. So what I was hearing was that Wes and Nancy would be reaching out to the PSAPs, specifically those that were cutting in October, and get their dates rescheduled. And then as you're looking at those shifts, by plugging in those PSAPs that were cutting in October, that's when you would reach out personally to other PSAPs that need to be adjusted and settle on dates for them. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And
okay.
Kimberly, I have to do that pretty quick because, as you know, Tim Goodwin will have to file by October 1. So we are going to scramble here pretty quick to get that calendar lined up for him to get it into the PUC.
Okay, so do you want PSAPs to reach out by email to you and Nancy if they've got questions around their cut dates, or if they've got concerns and they want to talk to you about movement based on what they see in 2020?
Either way, my plan was for us to contact each of you here real quick, actually, to go over that. If that would be, I want to be pretty quick in getting this calendar laid out. So we plan to reach out to you guys.
Okay, so why don't...
By the way, two-way conversation. If you want to give me, Nancy, an email, we can set up a time to talk about all that.
No, I think it would be great for you guys to reach out to the PSAP that we're supposed to be cutting in October, but if anyone else has schedule concerns, they should be emailing and reaching out to you ASAP so they can verbalize their concerns about if they got adjusted, be considerate of this, those kind of scheduling conflicts they may have.
Sure.
Would that help?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Right. So I see that Daryl has pulled up the tariff, which I was looking at myself, just to make sure that, so our compliance steps will be, there's also the order that requires us to file any deviations with the commission. So we'll file that. So our specific action steps will be to talk with the customers coming up, depending on, and get agreements with them. And then I'll make a filing between now and October 1st that reflects those agreements and indicates, depending on where we are in the discussion process, I'm going to make a filing next week, okay? And that filing will say where we are and what our plan is moving forward to regarding the rest of the schedule, because there's a lot of moving parts there, right? We have we want to decide how many are going to move and how far they'll move, and that discussion, particularly as it stretches out and towards the end of the schedule, will take a little bit more time. So from a compliance perspective, it'll take a couple filings with the commission and the user group to complete.
And Tim, it does say that deviations have to be agreed upon in writing. I think probably email would count under Colorado state law, but I think it's important to make sure that you have some record trail showing that the customers agreed to the changes.
Yes, that's our plan. And then Wes will look for Wes to be reaching out to you for those communications and agreements in writing. But it's not going to be anything magic other than, you're scheduled for October X, but we're pushing you back to January X. Is that okay? Yes. That's all it's going to be. We're not going to lawyer it up too much.
Good.
Are there any other updates on the schedule that we need to be aware of, Wes?
No, that's
Okay.
it in a nutshell.
Any voting members? Do you guys have any questions or comments regarding this? I don't know how much can be answered since it's not finalized just yet, but. Okay. Any other, Nancy or Wes? Any other updates on the status of the project?
I don't, Nancy. I'll go ahead and interject. I don't think so. I do know that we are redoing in more detail some of the surveys out there just to make sure that we've got everything buttoned up, particularly on some of those first installs. So we're going to be going through that, and that's all I know. Unless, Nancy, do you have anything?
No, that's great. We're in the process of scheduling the site survey checklist. Make sure everybody knows what they need to get done. And we're all on the same page. So I've already got 3 or 4 of them scheduled, and we'll continue scheduling more.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay. So we'll move on to new business, the review of the discussion item spreadsheet.
Okay, great. Bruce, did you want me to jump in on
Yes,
this?
please. You've
Okay.
got this down pat.
Fantastic. So after our group met last week, I went ahead and just prompted CenturyLink of these items that we want to have addressed. So if we can just go to the very top of the list, Daryl. So we actually have an open item, which is item number 2, and that carryover was to have CenturyLink discuss Kevin to get on and talk about that importance of the PDU, that possible single point of failure. Kevin wasn't able to get on the call last week, but I do see him today. So Kevin, are you able to give us some information about?
Yes. Do you have a copy of that PowerPoint that drew all the attention? Are you able?
Actually, we do, but Daryl, if you want to click on the diagram, it would be the 3rd tab over. Kevin, is this what you're looking for?
There was another document that had a PowerPoint that had the actual pictures of the back room.
Give me just a second. I think we've got it in here.
And really that back room deployment, I believe we snipped out and put it here on the screen, but we'll pull up that PowerPoint.
This does all the talking for me. Okay, so if you look at the picture there, right there on the very first one, it's got 2 PDUs on it. If you scroll to the second one, second page, it has 2 PDUs. Scroll to the 3rd page, a diagram that one of our people prepared neglected to put 2 PDUs on the frame. As a matter of fact, if you look at the left one, it doesn't even show a PDU. So the negligence of the diagram itself is what we're looking at. The systems do have, the actual implemented systems do have 2 PDUs.
Kevin, this is Ed Roth from Leader. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So my question now, if we're implementing 2 PDUs, it appears that the routers only have a single power supply. Is that still the case?
I believe so, yes.
So what's the plan if a PDU loses power or the PDU itself dies?
There's a redundancy.
Everything downstream.
There's a redundancy, so the one router will still be powered up and working. We will detect that a router went down. and we'll be able to aggressively pursue that because that is a compromise.
And if that router's down, is the traffic automatically rerouting to the other router? How does that work?
Yes, it is automatic. So within the, I don't want to get heavily technical here. Within the routing protocol itself, we will see that that router is not available. We will see in other ways also, but as far as the delivery of the system, we will see that that route is not available. And we will present a call.
And each router has capacity to handle all of the traffic of, okay.
Yes.
Kevin, would you, just for clarification through all of this, would you clarify both router A and B have separate PDU power, or they both get their power from the same single source?
The routers will plug into two different places. So router A will plug into PDU A, router B will plug into PDU B, and they will divide the system up as that way.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to pull up that diagram where you started before? There we go. Kevin, can you see that on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so that diagram on the left is our understanding of the deployment that shows the router and the single power supply.
Yes, and this diagram is inaccurate.
Because now we've got two PDUs.
Right, and it's on the actual photos. It's on the photos. It's just when someone created this, they weren't detailed enough.
So the PDU that I saw spec'd appeared to be kind of like a transfer switch almost, where it would select multiple input sources to provide output power.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's no longer really the strategy.
It still has two separate power sources. You plug in each PDU into two different power sources. In the event the input power to the racking itself loses one power source, so that both PDUs will still be powered up and still be working.
But the site preparation requirements called for two L5 plugs.
Yes.
We're only going to be able to. That won't power both PDUs with redundant input sources.
You know, I didn't consider that, but yes, I'm going to have to evaluate how many power plugs that has, if there's an inaccuracy in that too. We did ask for two plugs, and it was my understanding that the PDU, it's more than a power strip, it would balance out if we lost power on one of them. That was my understanding, but I'm going to say I did not get that granular into my questions for them.
So are we saying now that we have the two plugs have to be two separate circuits? Because I didn't understand that before.
There will, yes, the whole time was intended to have two separate circuits for every installation. And it may be just a technical, they do something different. I can't answer that right off. I just didn't ask that question. I didn't think about it.
So I guess for me, I am a little bit frustrated. You know, we've been trying to do our due diligence to make sure we have the proper power and everything going to the location where you guys are going to plug in. And it seems like there's now, you know, there's two PDUs. There was one, there was one. Does that change the amount of rack space that we need for this? I guess
it does not.
I feel like we're kind of coming at this from a very unorganized place.
It does not change the rack space. It's just this drawing is inaccurate. The actual photos reflects the two PDUs.
Yeah, it doesn't impact the rack space, but it sounds like it could potentially impact the electrical requirements. If you're saying there's redundant inputs to two PDUs now.
I need to validate. Yes, I did not consider asking that question.
So that would mean we would need 4, is it LP5 plugs?
It would be 2 circuits, but still, but whether or not you have 2 plugs on each circuit or 1 plug on each circuit is the question.
This is Daryl. We have a voting member by chat who asked if we can get the reference materials to be updated to show that correction on the number of PDUs. Can we get, in other words, can we get an updated version of the diagrams?
So this is Kimberly. I'm happy for us to take that, but I need CenturyLink to take a look at that tab once we make that modification, and I'm volunteering you, Ed, because you did a great job doing that. But then if, Kevin, if you can give us an updated rack picture that shows the 2 PDUs, and we can put it into the logical diagram, and then I just need you guys to validate that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I believe so.
So, go ahead, sorry.
And sorry, also to assess the redundancy of the overall power, we'll need an answer to that question, whether each PDU has 2 inputs or a single input each.
And that's like I said, that's a great question. I just didn't consider asking that when I was talking to them.
So yeah, I'd like to indicate that on the diagram when I update the diagram. So the sooner we get that answered, that would be better.
And is Ed, what's your last name? I can actually reach out to you if you like.
It's Roth, R-O-T-H.
Okay.
Okay, so the action item I have for this would be Kevin's going to confirm power requirements and what modifications need to be made. He's going to update the rack photo to reflect 2 PDUs. And once we get that, then Ed with Lita will update that logical diagram and have that at that diagram based on the CTL discussion, that tab. And all that information will be there, so it's a one-stop shop for everyone. Is there any other action item on this piece that we need to take? So the single points of failure of having 1 power supply on each router, CenturyLink's position is that's okay because you have multiple routers and they are live in an active deployment.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions on this item?
And then, Kimberly, I think once Kevin verifies the electrical piece, it would be great to have in writing the very detailed and specific requirements for what we need to do electrically in that area. Not just a discussion. I would like to see written documentation.
I understand.
And to add to that, just really quickly, a confirmation that that is the exact model of PDU that we're putting into place. It was in one of those PowerPoints. I'd just like to confirm that is the model.
I can check that too. I don't believe they've changed, but I believe isn't what you're asking. So I will validate that.
Okay, so I've updated the action item to include 2 other items, which is a written statement that clearly articulates the electrical requirements, and then not just a confirmation, but just really outlining them clearly what we need to do. And that's critical for all of us because there's a cost associated, and we sure don't want to pay for a contractor to come out and make these modifications and then have to do it again. So that is somewhat time sensitive for many of us. And then the other piece of it is, Kevin, you're going to provide the model of the PDU. Do we have a date that, Kevin, you can wrap this stuff up for us?
My contact is on vacation. I will reach out to his backup today and see if they can begin that. So I'm going to say by the end of next week, I should have that. If that's appropriate for you. If it needs to be faster, I can escalate.
I think we could put a due date on this for, if we could do 9/26 by end of business, that would be great.
That works for me.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions about the equipment at the demarcation, single points of failure, electrical requirements? It's all kind of rolled into one, and obviously very critical. Okay, great. So the PM hours, we're going to come back to this. If I understand correctly on the agenda, Daryl, you've got this item specifically called out for tracking.
I don't.
Nope.
Do we have
okay.
it? No, I don't think we do.
Okay, I was confusing the other cost calculator. So the item for this one is the PM tracking hours. And we talked a little bit about this last week when I showed everybody the project tracking spreadsheet and just tracking the hours. We really haven't figured out a good way to track those hours. That project tracking spreadsheet, I have a space reserved for that, so we can use that tool so it's all in one spreadsheet, but we obviously have a need to start tracking these hours, so we do tend to look to use CenturyLink, and I guess this is Wes and Nancy. We want to know hours, and I know you're tracking them internally, but we want to be able to track them too because we're going to be billed for these hours, so we need to have a good tracking in place to be able to account for the time. So this is an open item. I don't know if we've come to a solution on this, so we're open to ideas on how we can resolve the issue. So if anyone has any thoughts.
Yeah, we'll look at that on our side as well, Kimberly. I know that it is an open question. So.
Okay. And if you want to even look at this cost hours section on this project tracking spreadsheet, and perhaps that's something we can use and modify to make it fit, and we can all just dump time in there so we can track those projects. All right, so I'm going to keep this as an open item. The next one had to do with CenturyLink for the ESInet presentation, just about monitoring. Kevin just mentioned that they would know if a router was offline. So we wanted to get a date from CenturyLink on when they could do this presentation to this group. Take 30 minutes to an hour of our meeting and present to us about how you're going to be monitoring the network and the equipment on the network. So were you guys able to circle back internally and pick a date?
No, we don't have a date, Kevin, at that point. Quite frankly, we'll need to get back with you on that.
Okay. And if it helps, we can email you some dates too on future meetings. I know we have other items that are more pressing right now, but it would be good for us to get an understanding before we're live on the network. Not everybody has been able to participate in all the conversations, so it'd be really helpful.
I know that's an open question. Yeah, if you would kindly bounce back with some of those dates, and we can put that together on that. I think in some measure we kind of have covered some of this, right?
Absolutely.
It's really part of the tariff anyway, as far as checking that and what we're doing there. So
you have not everybody was able to participate in the tariff. So I think what's happened over time is segmented knowledge and understanding. So it definitely will feel maybe redundant for some of your team, but it hopefully will be redundant for some of us. I think the more times we can hear it and create an open dialogue, the better we're going to understand what's expected and what's going to be happening. So I'll send you some dates. I'll take that as an action item to get that to you.
Would you send it to all three of us, Nancy, me, and Kevin, because Kevin would be leading that conversation.
Yep, I can do that. Okay, the next one had to do with specific questions that Denver had, and Kevin, you said you were going to follow up with Athena, and so I don't show that that's happened. It may have occurred, but if it hasn't, I want to make sure that we don't lose track of that. She had some specific questions about diversity into their building.
And like I said, I said before, I'm not comfortable talking about an individual customer on a platform like this.
I'm not asking for that, Kevin.
I
I
know
just want to make sure that you
we did
followed up
talk.
with her.
We did follow up with her.
Okay, so is Denver on the call?
Athena told me that she might be late.
Okay. So, Kevin, that's great. You followed up with her. Once I hear back from Denver that this is a closed item, I'll just close it out.
It's closed for now.
Okay, I'll talk to Athena.
There's more to do on that, that's for sure. And so Denver and C1 and us will still have to nail down some open items there. There's no doubt.
Okay, great. Just as long as the conversations are happening now and not when they're close to deployment, that's perfect. Organization of the project. So this piece of it, we had concerns about making sure that the project was getting organized. We understand that there's been a handoff of project managers, which I know is always tricky, but at least it was early enough on in the project. So from a big picture perspective, trying to answer the organization of the project, this project tracking sheet was designed. CenturyLink is going to be utilizing that to communicate to the PSAPs and just status of the project. And then I showed everybody that project document last week. So hopefully that'll be a good way to help with some of the organizations of the project and the open tasks, like those dependencies on the electrical requirements. From a big picture perspective, we were still wanting some additional information from CenturyLink, and that has to do with some schematics, so some more diagrams, some dialogue, and that's what the folks were talking about, and I put that in that email to you, so this really blends over to the next item as well, of the technical diagram, the visibility between Entrata, what they're providing. So these two items are together. Do you guys have more information, or do you have a response to these items?
Well, let me say, Nancy, if I could kind of jump in. Kimberly, we're grateful that you set up the data sheet for action items on this install. Having that greater detail helps both sides there really drill down on all the nuances that have to be lined up in order for backroom preparation, et cetera. So that is giving Nancy and me and the whole team better guidance of those action items that need to be taken care of, and so that's good. So we're going to be going through those with each customer in detail, and in fact, it also triggered the need that we want to go back through and redo some of these surveys because we think that triggered the need to double check what might not have been covered in the initial surveys out there. So look for more interaction with Nancy leading the way than what you might have seen earlier with the initial surveys 3 months ago. Does that help?
So I think that's going to be helpful. I guess I open it up to everybody on the call from the 911 folks. What specifically would you like CenturyLink to deliver to you that you're not getting? Does the project tracking help you? Is there more gaps that you want filled? Where are you all at on that? So, Wes, I'm going to assume that silence is good, so we'll continue moving forward and work off of that spreadsheet. And as you guys go through, if there's items that you find, again, that are gaps, let's get that into that project tracking spreadsheet so then we can track that across all of the deployments.
That'll work for us. And obviously it's an open line of communication as we go through that. Different folks within the PSAPs and authorities need to see more like what we have discussed with the pictures of the back room, the rack, et cetera. It's an open line of communication. We're happy to fill in any ensuing questions that might come up.
This is Ed from Leah. Just real quickly, I think there's a small gap in between the site survey and then providing information back to the PSAPs in terms of actually defining where your equipment is going to go. I don't know if that's going to exist at all sites, but we definitely have that situation here. So I don't know if that's part of your project plan or can be added as part of it to make that intermediate step of defining where things will actually be installed.
No, good point, Ed. Just like our conversation the other day, and determining obviously the extension of the DMARC, et cetera, and relative to the rack. You're right, and that's something that isn't covered in the detail that we'll obviously go through that in each situation here.
Okay.
That's an excellent point. I'm going to just add that that's an item that you guys are going to be including when you circle back with the PSAPs to close that gap.
Yeah, we found that in most situations thus far. So, yeah.
Okay, so the next item, which is the updated schedule, we've already discussed that, and so we've got action items already outlined in that, and so that's included on the bottom there for that item. So that's item 12. So going on to item 14, we had a question, and this was part of the project plan that was open, is a documentation of a contingency plan. What would that look like if things don't go well? So Wes, your action item on the last call was to work with David on including a contingency rollback plan in the project document.
Yeah, we are not disconnecting the old CAMA network. So if on the day of cut, it'll be readily apparent if things are not 100%, and then we would simply go back and go plug back into the CAMA network. But Kevin, unless there's something more detailed on that, we're not disconnecting the old until the new ESInet is time tested up and working 100%, and all confidence is established that it's working fine. But it's pretty straightforward on that is the rollback plan. Kevin, would you care to elaborate?
Yes, there is a test procedure. I'm going to call it a MOP, short of a better word to use. There is a protocol, a test procedure we will cover. And prior to a system being migrated, that will be, each individual system will be evaluated, and you will be aware of what the contingency will be on each individual system. Because we have to have a contingency while we're cutting, we have to have a lot of details defined as each PSAP is cutting over, which will be as individualized as each PSAP.
Kevin, will that MOP be provided to us prior to the cut when we're getting ready so we can follow the MOP?
We would have to. Yes, we have an actual. We have a template. I don't know if it's something I'm allowed to share, but we do have it right now. We have a template of what we have, and then we will add to the template. So it's not complete yet, but every system, before we cut it over, before we migrate it, we will have to define what happens during that migration.
There's like 12 points on that template, Kevin. Maybe we can put something up generically, you think, or
that'd be easy to do, but and that's a low hanging fruit. We can provide a template. No, if you can accept the fact that we're going to be adding to it also, and we can add some notes immediately. But there's some, as we start doing the PSAPs, the PSAP needs to know what happens during that process. And there's got to be a time they can make their conversion, presuming they're unable to make it exactly dual, but every PSAP will have to be evaluated working with the PSAP themselves, and a contingency will have to be provided in that detail. And I just don't have the actual format. I know we have a test procedure, but
and I'm assuming it's similar to cutting a PSAP and
yes,
going through the nylon trunks. And so I think probably the majority of us on here have cut a PSAP before. So it's ringing a bell on how that works when you're cutting and you've got the translation folks on the phone and you're working through all that. So sounds like it's a similar process.
It is. It's exactly
and the action item. Okay, fantastic. That's good to know. And then the question of how long will the camera trunks be in place and readily available. So we may cut and everything is going fine, but we have something major that happens hours, days later. How long are those camera trunks going to be available as a contingency rollback?
We haven't discussed that internally. The lowest priority is to disconnect the trunks, but it's not going to be. It's going to be more than a week. So I can say it's going to be at least a week. You're going to have both circuits going to be there. But any more detail than that, we haven't talked about it exactly how long we're going to leave it in. And another thing is when you're converting, let's say someone's going to a PGM, that will take a manual lift and lay to put it back to the other one. So it's not really necessarily an easy thing for a PSAP to do. If a PSAP is capable of doing a parallel, having both at the same time, that'd be easier. But we just haven't discussed how long we're going to leave the old ones in.
Kimberly, David White and I did discuss this, and I think typically what they were doing out in Utah, where they converted all that, was a couple of weeks. But again, we're probably going to take a fresh look at that and come up with a date that would better answer your question there.
Okay, I'm going to put that as an action item. So from a MOP perspective, a contingency MOP, we understand that'll be customized prior to the cut for each of the PSAP authority. And then if you can take the action item of how long will those options be available to roll back to CAMA, or days or weeks, then during that MOP development, the PSAP will be able to let you know, to Kevin's point, whether or not they can run simultaneous or if it's going to be a manual piece on the CPE side. That would need to be identified as well. If that needs to happen, a rollback, and we have the camera trunks available, what work is required on your end and what work is required on our end, because you're right, it's not going to be automatic once that cut's made. Does that make sense?
Yes, I agree. I agree with what you said.
Okay, and I'll finish those details in a minute on that one. So the next open item had to do with the SKU numbers and parts along with the diagram. So they were asking for the SKU numbers for the equipment. And Wes, that was your action item, or I think you're giving that to Kevin. So.
Yeah, I could answer that, but Kevin, do you want to take it? I mean, it's part of the service offering. We're not going into the specific SKU items, but Kevin, I'll let you, the technical guy, go ahead and answer that.
No, we're not given an inventory of the network or the equipment. We're delivering in a 911 E911 system, we don't tell you, we don't define if you're going through a pair gain or not, or in what model numbers of those cards. So the handoff is the Ethernet connection, and we can give you that detail, but as far as the individual items we're not going to add to. We're not going to provide that.
And the net of that is that that's all incorporated into the service offering. And should something in that equipment be end of life, say 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, and need to be replaced, then we replace it. But there's not a crystal ball on that, which is why we include the comfort and guarantee that that equipment there is part of the service offering, and we cover it, guarantee it, etc.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that?
Not a question, just a quick comment that I don't know if there's any chance of CenturyLink reconsidering that position. It's just, I'm sure you're aware, it's a little bit different paradigm when we're talking about networks now, and security has to be maintained, and the problem with end of life is Cisco will not issue security patches anymore on end of life equipment. So that's my concern from my position. Just want to throw that out there.
Was that Ed?
It was, yes.
Good, gotcha. Yeah. Kevin, I'd leave you to comment on that. I think that I hear what Ed's saying, but
I understand.
It hasn't been an issue before.
Right, I understand, but and then any other product we deliver, we don't tell everybody, we don't present model numbers and any part of the delivery. We say we'll deliver service.
Okay, the next item is item 17, and that had to do with, we were talking about firewalls and having a logical diagram because PSAPs are going to want to place a firewall behind the CenturyLink equipment. And the PSAPs need that logical diagram so they can provision this firewall. So, Wes, that was your follow-up item, and you were going to get with Kevin on that.
Well, yeah, Kevin, if you want to go through the diagram again and speak to that.
I didn't prepare for that question. What diagram? I did not prepare a diagram other than what's already there. I didn't know about this. Other than I can verbally tell you that our handoff is going to be an Ethernet connection, and we recommended that a firewall that goes into a firewall comes out into your CPE, unless there's a PGM and there's no firewall on a PGM. So what detail do you want that? I mean, it's an in and out type scenario.
Not really.
I heard it. Not really. You weren't muted.
Yeah, I don't know who said not really, but in the description there it talks about ports and protocols. So definitely if a PSAP or an authority is provisioning their own firewall, they'll need to know what ports and protocols you need to allow through that firewall.
I have a document, and I will have to look at it, and I can make sure it doesn't say do not distribute, but I have a document from, I do have a document, and I can take a look at that, make sure it doesn't say something that says I can't share it.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this as an action item for you, Kevin, because to Ed's point, we do need to know that information, or we can't configure the firewall, and it's not going to let that information through. So there's going to be a deliverable that's going to be needed from CenturyLink on this.
And it may be as simple as RFAI protocol, but I have to look and see what they say. I don't know the depth of this. I've reviewed it, but I didn't study it.
Okay, I'll keep that as an open action item for you.
Thank you.
And then it looks like another item was added on here. I'm not sure if I added this or if Bretza did directly. I think it could have been Bretza.
I've never seen that before. Yeah.
I think it could have been Joe or Patty. So, Joe or Patty, if you're on the phone, do you want to talk about this? This is great.
Yeah, I added it. I think it's just more for information right now that we were trying to co-terminate the SIP license when or renew it when a time comes, but at the same time that our Entrado contract was up. And when we attempted to do that, then the price jumped to, I'm not in front of that spreadsheet, but it was, I think, $33.50 or $32.50. So we are still trying to negotiate. It just seemed like they pulled that number out of the air when we brought that up. So I guess at this point we're still trying to figure it out, but it is something for everybody to be aware of, especially if you have a contract that may be coming to its end life within this 60-month period.
Patty, isn't your Viper it's a Viper as a service offering, so they're amortizing costs maybe to back end on the contract? Is that what's going on?
It it might be, but I think there's some stuff in their contract that they're kind of violating on their end. We're just bringing something to their attention that was already in the contract.
So I think this is good information to share. We have a quote as well. We'll take a look at what that cost is per seat, and we'll dump that in here too. So not an action item for CenturyLink, but definitely a good conversation item for the 911 folks as it relates to these new SIP licenses that Intrado has identified within the last few months that they're going to be charging everyone. All right, so those are all of the items. Does anybody have anything else they want us to add on to the spreadsheet that they would like to document or follow up?
This is Kevin. So I just reviewed the document that was forwarded to me, and it does not. I'm going to have to find the ports for the firewall stuff. It is specific to a specific product, and that's not what you want. So Kevin will put that on his list.
Awesome. You're going to see your name a lot on this list. So
I know it.
Great. All right. Well, I think we're through the discussion items. Just a reminder for all the 911 folks, if you have items you want to see on here or talk through, you can add them yourself like Patty did, which was awesome, or you can email them over to either Bruce or myself, and we'll get them added. So, Daryl, I think we're up to the ESInet cost calculator.
Thank you, Kimberly. So Bruce actually started this. He put together, I'm sorry, did I just talk over someone? Okay. Bruce actually started this. He put together a spreadsheet that was interactive with some calculations in it designed to help individual 911 authorities see how much the migration was going to cost them in terms of the non-recurring costs and project management costs, which should both be reimbursed through the federal 911 grant and the matching funds that were put together by or that were designated by the Public Utilities Commission, as well as the monthly recurring costs and when those costs would kick in and how much you would have to pay for how much of those monthly recurring costs you would have to pay in the first and second year. Kimberly also did some work on it, and then I've done some additional fine-tuning on it, so I think we're ready to provide it if I can remember where I put it. I think, so if you go on that ESInet users group sign-in page, down near the bottom, there's a list of folders that are available to you. One of them is resources. If you click that resources folder, one of the items in there is a spreadsheet that says ESInet cost calculator. And let me zoom in on this a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see on your screens. So there's only 3 fields in here that you can edit. Those fields are the planned migration date for your PSAP, the last day of your fiscal year after migration. So let's say that you are migrating on, and apparently nobody is at this point, so let's change this to something more realistic. Let's say you're migrating on 3/15 of 2020. And let's say you follow the calendar year for your fiscal year. The last day of your fiscal year after migration would be 12/31/2020. And you also have to put in how many concurrent sessions you have. Let's say it's 10. The spreadsheet will calculate how many months are remaining in the year after your migration. So you're migrating in March. There's 9 months after March. And then it will also calculate then what your costs are for year 1, including your non-recurring costs, your maximum possible project management fee, that's assuming the full 10 hours, which is the cap, and what your monthly recurring costs are, times the number of months that you will have to pay for those recurring costs. Remember, the non-recurring costs include a 6-month moratorium. So even though there's 9 months remaining in the year, you would only have to pay 3 months of recurring costs at the higher rate. It shows it shows what your total is for that year, how much is being reimbursed by the grant, which is equal to the non-recurring costs and the project management costs, and how much is left over, which is also equal to the monthly recurring costs. We also put in here, even though we didn't assign any figures to it, some other things that you may want to think about in terms of additional costs, like the electrical requirements, additional space if necessary for the rack space. CenturyLink is providing the rack itself, but if you don't have any room in your back room and you have to expand that area or buy some outside space for that or make some space for it, that will be a cost for you. Cables run from the demarcation to the CPE. If those are separated, that's a cost for you, as well as potentially SIP licensing and new CPE equipment. And then year 2 won't be the same for everyone because it depends on where in the fiscal year, your migration falls compared to when your fiscal year ends. So in the example we used of March with your fiscal year ending in December, your second year will be a full year of the new costs, which are $752.22 per concurrent session. So for our hypothetical 10 concurrent sessions, that comes out to $75.22.20 for the whole number of concurrent sessions times 12 months is $90,000. But if it happened later in the year, let's say it happens on October 15th of 2020, and the end of your fiscal year is December 31st, 2020, then you see this goes down to 0 because your 6-month moratorium will take you past the end of your fiscal year. So you're not actually going to pay any monthly recurring costs in your first year. In your second year, you will pay 8 months because that is how many months will be left over after that 6-month moratorium runs out. And then in the third year and beyond, pretty much everybody, not pretty much, but everybody will have run out of that 6-month moratorium, so you will have to pay the full 12 months of the new costs at the higher rate. And then to help explain all this, something I did yesterday, and Kimberly, I hadn't had a chance to circulate this with you or Bruce, so hopefully I didn't make any errors in here, but we can fix it if I did. I added a narrative which puts it into an explanation, so that if you're looking at this and it's just a bunch of numbers to you, but you want a little bit more of a descriptive narrative as to what you're looking at, this will help explain it. So it says the costs these are the costs for one PSAP. So this is something you should consider when you're looking at this. If you have multiple PSAPs like Kimberly does, you'll need to do this separately for each PSAP to figure out what your costs are going to be for each year. But since most 911 authorities fund one PSAP, most 911 authorities will only have to do this once. So it is the cost for one PSAP. If you have your PSAPs all going within the same month, you might be able to combine them that way. But otherwise, you'll have to do them separately and add those numbers together. One question I've gotten quite a bit that I wanted to clarify here is that you do have to pay your existing charges for basic emergency service until your migration date. After your migration date, those legacy basic emergency service charges go away. The monthly recurring costs for the ESInet are not in addition to the existing charges for basic emergency service. They're a replacement for it. So you pay your existing basic emergency service charges from CenturyLink until you migrate. There's 6 months with no charges due to that moratorium, and then the new charges start after the 6 months, and those new charges are in lieu of the old charges. They're not in addition to the old charges. Your total non-recurring charge is shown here. That number matches what you see up here in year 1, which is the addition of the non-recurring, is the totality of the non-recurring charges and the project management fees. It shows you how many months with that 6-month moratorium you're going to have to pay in your first fiscal year. Using our example up here, it's 0. If it migrated earlier in the fiscal year, then there would be a number other than 0 here. Based on that number of months, how many months or how much are you going to have to pay for monthly recurring charges in your first year? And again, this part is not reimbursed. It is only the non-recurring charges and the project management fees that will be reimbursed. Based on when your PSAP migrates and when the 6-month moratorium ends, you will have to pay. You may not have to pay a full year's worth of MRC in the second year. Based on the dates and values you entered, you can expect to pay this much for MRC in the second year. And then finally, for the third year, by the third year, the 6-month moratorium will be complete for all PSAP, so all 911 authorities can expect to pay for a full 12 months of service at the new rates. Based on your number of concurrent sessions, that amount will be this. So I've made this available in the resources folder. It is available for anyone to use, and you should have edit access to these 3 fields that are shown in light blue. Those are the only 3 fields that you should be able to edit. But you can put in your own figures for this spreadsheet, and it will automatically change the calculations. And I'm curious if anybody on here wants to give it a try while we're on, so we can see what it does.
Daryl, you can do mine real quick if you want. We're going to be Mike. We'll just put down January 7th, 2020.
January 7th, 2020. Do you use the calendar year for your fiscal year?
We do.
So that won't change. And how many concurrent sessions?
46.
So for you, your non-recurring costs are here. Your project management fee, this is the maximum project management fee are here, coming to a total of NRC migration costs here. That is the part that would be reimbursed by the grant, but you do have to pay it up front. And then you would have a 6-month moratorium followed by 5 months of the new MRC costs, which come to a total of $173, and that part is not reimbursed. And then, well, this didn't work. So you've got 5 months here, so you should have 11 months here. Doggone it, I thought I had it working correctly. Let's see if I can fix this.
Well, I think just overall this is really helpful because it's confusing and it's a lot of money. And there's a lot of moving pieces, and then for PSAPs to be able to plug in the other migration costs to consider is great. So how would you like everyone to proceed? Would you like them to just take this cost calculator, copy the spreadsheet into a new one that they can use so they can customize it?
We can do that. The other way is they can actually just go in through the folder and put in their own numbers in those 3 blue fields, and it should update the rest of it once I get this particular calculation fixed. But if they would rather have their own copy, they can download that copy as an Excel spreadsheet and make whatever changes they want to it.
Are they able to edit line 22 to 28 for those other costs?
No, they are not. I think we just put those in as a placeholder to make people think about it, but I could change those to editable fields, and then they could, when they're done, they could print that out. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a good idea. The other option, again, would be to download it as an Excel spreadsheet, and then they can change whatever field they want.
Okay.
And maybe I can put that up here at the top and say, your options are to fill in the fields in blue, to update the calculations, or you can download this as an Excel spreadsheet and make whatever other changes you need to make. So let me, there we go, I fixed it. So because you had 5 months left in your fiscal year, in year 1, it shows 11 months for year 2, because that 6 month moratorium will take you. Yeah, that's not correct either, is it? I'm gonna have to figure this out.
I was gonna say, doing math on a spreadsheet when you've got 57 people watching you is never fun.
Yeah. No, I think I had it. I think I
No
had it correct the
pressure.
first. I had it correct the first time. It should be 12 months because your 6-month moratorium will be done before the end of the first year.
Yes.
So I should have left it where it was. There we go. 12. It was correct the first time. And then year 3 is the same for you because you've got 12 months in both year 2 and year 3. And then it fills in all of the narrative down here. Which is the same information as up here. It just puts it into a more text-based format.
Got it. I really like it. I think it's very helpful to make sure I can track everything and then plug it into the budget for next year. So thank you for doing that.
And I'll send a direct link out now that I've introduced it. I'll send a direct link out to the ESInet users group listserv with instructions. If you would like to download it, you can do that. Oh, I see somebody else is updating it right now. That's the idea.
That's great.
That's all I had on that. But if anybody has any ideas or if you find any errors specifically, let me know. If you have any other ideas on how to improve this, let me know. We can keep tinkering with this to make it a better tool if we have ideas on how to do that.
Perfect.
And that's all I have.
Okay.
And I saw Bruce sent a chat message that he left, so I think you're in charge now.
Yep. So we're up to open discussion. Does anybody have anything else for this group that they would like to bring up? One of the items I just want to point out is just the attendance. It's phenomenal to have 52 people, even though some of them may be duplicate if you're called in and using the computer, but it's just wonderful to have so many authorities represented. So thank you for participating and being engaged. It's very helpful.
I'll second that.
All right, so this now is into the public comment, and so people that are non-voting members and anyone that has joined the call that is not part of the 911 PSAPS authorities, if they have items they want to bring forward to this group, this would be your time. Fantastic. Sounds like we've answered all the questions. So I don't have anything else. And Daryl, do you have anything else for the group?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So just parting thoughts then. Take a look at the discussion items. It's been updated to reflect today's action items. Take a look at that project tracking sheet. If you've got schedule changes that you need or you want schedule considerations because of conflicts, you need to email Wes and Nancy and make sure that they're aware of those. And then play around with this ESInet cost calculator that Daryl created. So a couple of items for all of you, and I'll go ahead and conclude the call then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all.